Welcome to this explainer. If you've ever thought company culture was really just about pizza parties and vague feel-good vibes, you might want to buckle up because we are about to completely shift your perspective. Today, we're diving into what actually happens when the hard, undeniable math of business slams right into the messy, unpredictable reality of human emotion. We're going to pull back the curtain on a hidden psychological framework that completely dictates hiring and team dynamics. So we usually tend to divide the corporate world into two completely different buckets, right? On one side, you have the hard, measurable stuff, your P&L statements, your spreadsheets, quantifiable data. And then on the other side, you've got the soft, squishy, unmeasurable human feelings, things like morale, fear, and trust. But what if human emotion is actually just math? Let's take a look at what happens when we plug psychology into a rigorous mathematical framework. To get started, we really have to throw out the old school assumption that standard incentives, like, say, a steady paycheck, universally motivate everyone. The old world basically views employees as uniform, identical cogs in a machine. But the data shows something completely different. Human motivation actually fractures across very distinct, mathematically mappable psychological value systems. In a framework called spiral dynamics, these are referred to as vMEMEs. And as we're going to see, something as universally accepted as the desire for financial security is interpreted in radically different ways depending on your profile. Looking at data collected across 79 countries, this idea of a universal priority fractures almost immediately. Sure, financial stability correlates positively with some mindsets, like the purple, orange, and blue profiles. But get this, it's shockingly negative for others. It all comes down to the fact that the exact same signal means completely different things. While a purple mindset looks at stability and sees much-needed security, a red profile might look at it and see an opportunity for disruption, a chance to reclaim power. An orange profile, they might view excessive safety data as just irrelevant noise getting in the way of their performance metrics. And a yellow profile could see it as losing a crucial anchor for adaptive navigation. So yeah, stability is definitely not universal. Here's our quick roadmap for today's explainer. First, the universal priority myth. Then, the priority paradox data, followed by the algebra of conscience, mapping the butterfly effect, and finally, we'll wrap up with the new management math. Section 1. The universal priority myth, breaking the chainsaw approach. A lot of organizations make this massive assumption that if you remove financial stability from your job signaling, people will just naturally figure it out and align with your company for other reasons. But if you just blindly strip that stability away without actually understanding your team's dominant psychological profile, your hiring alignment is going to fracture, and fast. The stages don't just gently shift, they completely diverge. This misaligned hiring protocol quickly escalates into cultural fragmentation and, ultimately, deep, silent distrust. Section 2. The priority paradox data, the purple tribal anchor. So, across 1,311 responses in 20 different languages, we see a positive 0.0623 Pearson correlation between financial stability and the purple spiral dynamics mindset. And with a critical value sitting at 0.0542, this is absolutely not just background noise. This is a highly statistically significant pattern. But what does that number actually mean for real people in the real world? Well, it turns out for this specific purple profile, money isn't just cash to be spent on the weekend. It acts as a deep tribal anchor. The purple stage is fundamentally rooted in collective belonging and predictability. So if you remove financial stability from the equation, they don't see it as some exciting opportunity to take individual risks. Not at all. They see the entire group losing its safety net, and they feel immediately deeply threatened. Section 3. The algebra of conscience, formalizing the soul. Okay, let's look at this dynamic programming model. It's an interface called SD Navigator. And here's a really fascinating detail. It was actually created via AI vibe coding. Basically, that's this massive trend heading into 2026, where users just use natural language to instruct an LLM like Claude to build out entire apps without writing traditional code. Pretty wild. Anyway, on the left of this interface, we track the state vector, which is the shifting psychological profile of your company. On the right, we have the control inputs like management actions, for example, reducing staff. When you combine these, the system generates incredibly context-sensitive predictions about exactly how your talent is going to react. To actually hit the bullseye of human motivation, this model can't just look at lagging indicators. Like, knowing whether someone badged in on time today isn't enough. By the time you're checking that, they might have already mentally quit. Instead, this system senses data across 5 really deep, interconnected layers, moving all the way from visible behaviors down through motivation, leadership trust, internal psychology, and even structural demographic barriers. Section 4. Mapping the butterfly effect, the prism of management. Think about it like a prism. The exact same management action can have completely different, refracted side effects depending on the group. Take an action like mandating unpaid vacation. A purple family business might actually accept it as a shared ritual sacrifice that brings the group closer together. A green nonprofit might accept it out of pure solidarity just to save a coworker's job. But an orange sales organization, they're going to reject it completely. They see it as a career block and totally inefficient, and honestly, they'll probably be updating their resumes by lunchtime. It's one action yielding completely divergent results. Now let's map out how this builds over time, with a heavy action like layoffs. A basic spreadsheet might tell you, hey, reducing staff saves us $2 million today. But that spreadsheet is completely blind to the butterfly effect. Fast forward 1 month, and fear spikes across the board. 3 months out, the model predicts an increase in ageism as the terrified tribe starts turning on itself to fight for resources. And by month 6, you're looking at a complete and total crash in leadership legitimacy. This massive disconnect creates what we can call a Tower of Babel scenario. Imagine a management team that's completely dominated by aggressive red and profit-driven orange mindsets, and they are trying to motivate a staff that deeply values blue safety and yellow systemic competence. If management tries to get that safety-oriented staff fired up by offering a luxury watch for hitting incredibly reckless profit targets, the whole system just collapses. They aren't generating motivation at all. They're just generating anxiety, simply because they aren't speaking the same psychological language. Section 5. The new management math, algorithmic empathy. A mathematical model like this doesn't just guess. It simultaneously tracks 13,000 unique correlations. Think about that. That is way more cause and effect links than the human brain could possibly hold at any one time. And because of that, it gives us a true global context before a major decision is ever even made. In this model, everything boils down to your objective score, the J-score. Standard management practices usually weight direct financial costs at 1.0, but they treat employee fear as an invisible 0. It's just not on the balance sheet. However, by mathematically assigning a massive 0.9 weight to employee fear, this algorithm actively penalizes toxic decisions. It mathematically proves that if you save $1 million but completely destroy the well-being of your team, your overall score is going to plummet. It turns out a frightened workplace is, at its core, a highly inefficient workplace. Human managers have this natural tendency to project our own biases, right? We just kind of assume everyone values the exact same things we do. But this algorithmic approach doesn't do that. It listens to the tribal purple employee and the community-driven green employee with equal weight. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this one question to really think about. What breaks when financial security stops being a universal signal in talent acquisition? Because it turns out scalable empathy might no longer just be a human trait. It might actually be a computable equation. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.